a big voice. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Clifford from World Boston. And thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Tricia. One of the things she mentioned was that we might not all as councils have quite the same mission. And the World Affairs Council of America has a very crisp 7-word mission, educating the American public on global issues. Ours at World Boston is longer and a little more convoluted. Does anybody have that problem? You? Well, we have someone here who's going to guide us in many ways on the question of advancing the mission, and that is Meryl Rose. She's a private consultant now with an expertise in strategic marketing. She runs her own Meryl Rose LLC and also Option A. And Meryl, prior to that, spent about 2 decades consulting with Porter Novelli in D.C., New York, Chicago, and Brussels. She has been a 2-term board member of CARE, and currently she is co-chair of CARE's Women's Initiative, which takes her around the world to developing countries. And I learned another neat fact about Meryl. She helped get elected the editor-in-chief many moons ago of the Daily Tar Heel of UNC Chapel Hill. This was Alan Murray, who's one of our speakers later. Alan was deputy editor at the Wall Street Journal, one of my former bosses, and I think has an oblique relationship to Laurie. But in any case, let's welcome Meryl Rose.
One of the things that I learned in running Alan Murray's campaign to be editor of the Daily Tar Heel was that when you've got good material, anything is possible. And certainly that is the case with the World Affairs Councils, and so I'm delighted to be here to talk about this subject. I'm pleased to be starting my presentation by bringing you some surprising news. Pollsters have finally found an issue on which the majority of Democrats and Republicans agree. For the first time in a decade, there is no partisan gap in isolationist sentiment. Over the past 50 years, the Pew Research Center and Gallup have asked Americans whether they agree or disagree with the following statement: the U.S. should mind its own business in international affairs. Although they used to be far apart on that question, Republicans and Democrats have both changed their views. So today, they're largely on the same page, with 50% of Democrats and 46% of Republicans holding that view. In 2002, just 30% of Americans agreed the U.S. should mind its own business. And in 2011, this year, it's up to a full 46%. So that is probably not encouraging news for the people in this audience whose mission is to educate, inspire, and engage Americans in critical global issues. In an environment of growing isolationism, what can you do to better fulfill the mission of the World Affairs Councils of America? I believe that communications can play an essential role in addressing this challenge. And the secret to using communications effectively is to have a laser focus. This requires taking 3 steps from the very beginning of a planning process. First, setting clear objectives. Second, targeting audiences selectively. And third, developing unifying strategies. Having a laser focus is also the best way to assure that your investment in communications, no matter the size of that investment, will work hard for you. So today, what I'll be doing is walking you through some initial thinking about these 3 steps, just as we would typically do if we were developing a communications plan to advance your mission. So the first step is setting clear objectives. In thinking about possible objectives, we're essentially asking ourselves, what do we want to happen as a result of our communication? You can use communication to support your council operations in a number of ways, as I'm sure you do. It can be used to build membership, it can be used to raise funds, or to increase participation in a particular activity. What I'm going to focus my remarks on today is achieving an overarching objective related to advancing the mission of the World Affairs Councils. One possible objective, given the data that I've just shared with you, would be to try to increase the percentage of Americans who believe it is best for our country to be active in world affairs. There's more research on this subject, and I'm going to discuss it in a minute. Unfortunately, the belief that our country should be active in world affairs has been steadily declining. So with that in mind, I'm not so sure it's a good idea to try to increase the percentage of Americans that hold this belief. It takes a lot more resources than you're likely to have available to get people to move against the tide. Perhaps a better goal would be something related to stemming the decline in the percentage of people who believe it's important for America to be active in world affairs. So, for example, our objective could be to deepen the conviction that America should be active in world affairs. The theory behind an objective like that is that those who have a strong conviction that we should be active in world affairs would be more likely to share those views with others and ideally to become engaged or intensify their engagement with public affairs. Just imagine how powerful it could be if all of those affiliated with the World Affairs Councils of America were focused on a single objective to deepen the conviction that America should be active in world affairs. Aligning the communications at councils across the country to help achieve this objective would be a terrific example of your theme here today, leveraging the national network. Your efforts, combined with those of other international NGOs, advocacy groups, think tanks, and others interested in foreign affairs, could have a dramatic effect on citizen engagement in these issues. And you'd be able to measure the collective effort of all of those, the collective impact of all of those efforts by following some tracking research that I'm going to talk about next. With the findings of this research that were released this year as a benchmark, you can monitor this same issue to measure progress against this objective over time. So that's what I'm going to use as the objective for the rest of my remarks. So the next step then, if that's what you're trying to achieve, would be targeting audiences selectively. Under ideal circumstances, what we would do would be to try to develop a deep understanding of the audiences or audience we're trying to reach. We would conduct research to learn what we can about that target audience, who they are, how they get information, what they currently know and believe about the topics of interest to us. The implication of the World Affairs Council's mission to educate, inspire, and engage Americans is that you have one very large, very diverse, and very tough to reach audience, Americans. Putting aside the issue of the resources that would be required to reach all Americans, we can be sure that if we try to reach everyone, we're likely to reach no one. So the question we must answer is, which Americans should we try to reach in order to achieve our objective? Unless you're in a position to conduct your own audience research, the best way to more specifically define your audience is to take a look at the relevant opinion research conducted by others. What we're most interested in is research that offers insight about those Americans who are currently or potentially interested in global affairs. The Pew Research Center for People in the Press is one excellent resource, and I'm sure you're aware of others. Among the many studies it has conducted that offer insight relevant to our audience is its political typology study, the latest version of which was released earlier this year. This fascinating study examines a range of issues and clusters respondents into groups based on how they respond to these issues. Pew identifies 8 cohesive groups of politically engaged Americans based on their values, their political beliefs, their party affiliation, and then defines the characteristics of the people in these groups. The 8 groups identified in the political typology report are described in full in the study report, which is available on the Pew website. To summarize them briefly, they do group them into categories of mostly Republican, mostly independent, and mostly Democratic groups. So in the mostly Republican category, they have Staunch Conservatives, who they describe as being highly engaged Tea Party supporters. They have Main Street Republicans, who they describe as being conservative on most issues. They have then in the independent, mostly independent group, 3 groups: libertarians, who they describe as free market, small government seculars; disaffecteds, who they describe as downscale and cynical; and postmoderns, who they say are moderates but liberal on social issues. And then finally, in the mostly Democratic category, they describe New Coalition Democrats as upbeat, majority-minority, hard-pressed Democrats, religious, financially struggling, and solid liberals, across-the-board liberal positions. So if you're curious to know what group you fit in, visit the Pew Center website and take an online quiz. I'm going to come back to those groups in a minute, but first I want to focus on one question on the survey that is particularly relevant to us. Survey respondents were asked to select the statement that comes closest to their view. Either it's best for the future of our country to be active in world affairs, or we should pay less attention to problems overseas and concentrate on problems here at home. I'm going to ask for a show of hands about agreement in this room. How many of you would agree with the first statement? It's best for the future of our country to be active in world affairs. I'm shocked. I'm shocked. Dare I ask if anyone agrees that we should pay less attention to problems overseas? Well, it looks like, obviously, the people in this room agree with the first statement. Only 33% of those surveyed by Pew said they believe it's best for the future of our country to be active in world affairs. As with the survey I mentioned earlier, this has been conducted over time, and the number of people with this view has been declining. 6 years ago, 44% of those surveyed supported America being active in world affairs, versus just 33% today. Before I go on, I'm interested to know what those of you make of this trend. Does anyone want to offer a perspective as to why fewer and fewer Americans believe we should be active in world affairs? Yes?
Sometimes I've got a question about how it's very that being active in world affairs is different than being military involved. I wonder if a lot of Americans view the second station
I don't know if everyone could hear her question, but she was asking about the phrasing of the question, that people might read different things into it, and it might view it as a question of being militarily involved. The Pew study does go into specific questions related to things like military involvement or intervention in different countries. So the way that I would interpret that question in the context of the others is as a broad marker of interest in international affairs versus domestic. Yes?
If everybody can hear me, one of the things that we're getting feedback out of the Nevada area is because of the loss, the perception of jobs that are being lost to the rest of the world, for whatever reason, but there's a backlash, I believe, because of that, that is that's causing folks to say, let's take care of our own business first.
Yeah, so her theory is that people are reacting that way because of a sense of jobs being lost overseas. Other comments? Yes.
Well, I have two comments. One is there's a difference between having an interest in what happens overseas and paying for it. You know, it's self-evident. More people travel, more people have passports than ever before. More people have foreign contacts than ever before. More people are aware of the economy, their economy, as a relationship to what goes on overseas. I don't think it's necessarily a no-nothing attitude, which is the way I think he was reading it. So, I mean, I wouldn't take it necessarily as a cause of despair.
Yeah, and not intended to say that it's a despair, but it's significant to note that it's declining. And I think what's particularly surprising about it is all of the factors that you just mentioned. There is a higher level of knowledge and understanding about America's role in the world and about foreign affairs. There is a higher degree of travel around the world. More people are working and studying outside of their home country. For all of those reasons that you mentioned, one would think that would mean that more Americans were interested in world affairs. But what the survey is showing is it doesn't necessarily connect. Yes?
It makes some really good points. However, I think more and more people are your surveys, they are, more and more people are not involved in world affairs because they believe that they already are in it. People don't participate themselves in the world. They actually want to go out there and find more opportunities for themselves. So people, you have to tell them, hey, you're already involved. So 100% of people are involved in world affairs. So that's why it's declining, because we're trying to separate it, but they believe there already is.
I think that's a really interesting point, that particularly from a generation where people grew up in a world in which it was not so unusual for people to be exposed to a multicultural world. Yes, a comment here. You, sir.
I put it somewhat in terms of hard power versus soft power. We've come through a period of using hard power and money, as the gentleman up front indicated, that I think has discouraged a lot of people. And if you were to somehow ask a question in terms of whether the U.S. should be active with soft power, whatever that means to people, you might get a different answer.
Yes.
I'm wondering since we're in the 33%, I wonder if we might be overcomplicating it. I mean, 6 years ago, people had jobs and they were making money and they felt like their house was in order, and now they're not. So I think it may come down to forget about what the issue is. It's focus on me or focus on them is kind of the way I read that. And so when you're in a tough time, you want to focus on you.
Yep. So I'm going to take a couple of other comments. I think these are all good possible ways of interpreting it. We've got one back here.
Does it break down the demographics between age and also basically levels of education? Because I'm thinking the younger folks are born into a globalized world with media and pop culture, perhaps have a higher attention to feel getting along versus perhaps the older generation.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about some of the characteristics of those different audiences in their response to that question. Let's see, we had, I know you've been waiting for a long time.
First time I sort of saying to the gentleman, I don't think it's either or question, and question. Paying more attention overseas and paying more attention at home. I think we've given what's happened in the past couple of years of perceived or actual lack of attention at home. I think that it's falsely obvious.
Okay. Well, I think all of your comments are illustrative and important to keep in mind. The way that I look at this research is in the context of trying to determine the audience that we should focus on to try to achieve our objective. And since the communications objective that I've suggested is to deepen the conviction that America should be active in world affairs, I believe we should focus our efforts on those 33% of Americans who already hold that belief. To me, that is a sizable target, and it is a group of people whose belief, if we want to pay attention to the trends, is somewhat fragile. And so I would suggest that we, with the objective of deepening that conviction, that we target then the 33%. Then what we can do with the political typology research is to dig more specifically to find some target audience segments within that group. When we look at those who agree with the statement, it's best for the future of our country to be active in world affairs, we can pick out the 4 typology groups with the largest percentages of people who agree with that statement. The 4 groups are the group they called solid liberals, where 47% of them agree. The group they called postmoderns, where 42% agree. Staunch conservatives, where 37% agree. And Main Street Republicans, where 37% agree with that statement. Now I'm going to look at the characteristics of each of these groups. And as I tell you a little bit more about them, see if you recognize them among your council members and others who are engaged in your activities. First, we'll close in on the staunch conservatives. This is a group that favors an assertive foreign policy, and virtually all say the best way to ensure peace is through military strength. 84% of them are Republicans, 72% agree with the Tea Party, more than 9 in 10 are non-Hispanic white. Staunch conservatives are the oldest of the typology groups identified by Pew, with more than 61% of them aged 50 or older. 56% are male, most are married and financially comfortable. 57% attend church every week. In terms of their media habits, 54% of staunch conservatives regularly watch Fox News, and more of them watch Glenn Beck and listen to Rush Limbaugh than any other group. How many of you would say the older, married, white male Republicans that Pew is referring to as staunch conservatives are well represented in your council? Hands up. Okay. For those of you who raised your hand, why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that's the case?
Well, Naples, Florida is.
Yes, Naples, Florida. I guess no more explanation needed there. Somebody else, yes.
In Peoria, we have a few folks who like to attend. We refer to them as our loyal opposition.
Yes.
Yeah, at Hampton Roads, Virginia, we have a very strong military presence. Several of my board members are retired military as well.
Yeah. Yes,
in Grand Rapids, while I don't think they follow Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh, it is a very conservative town, and he is from a very strong Dutch Calvinist background.
yes, yes, sir.
In Texas, we got a big area.
Yes. Enough said, yes. Did you have?
Well, in Las Vegas, we have Harry Reid.
Okay, in Las Vegas, Harry Reid. Okay, so let's look at another group with a significant number of people who feel we should be active in world affairs. They're called the Main Street Republicans. These people are less supportive of an assertive foreign policy than staunch conservatives. Yet, like staunch conservatives, members of this group are Republican, 76%, and non-Hispanic white. Most are homeowners and say they have enough income to lead the life they want. They are highly religious, with 91% saying religion is a very important part of their lives. The Main Street Republicans are concentrated in the South and the Midwest. About half of them watch evening news and read a daily newspaper. How many of you would say that this audience sounds like a lot of the people you serve? Okay. Yes, sir. Do you want to say why that sounds familiar to you?
Well, we're from Peoria, and it's from the Midwest, is conservative, and
Yeah. Yes. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Yes.
One of the factors we have is we have a number of corporate executives from the South who fit largely that profile, including the religious profile, but they also attach their interest in foreign affairs to international competitiveness and speak about it prominently, like the chairman of the UPS and I think all over the country about this. So there's a real linkage between the two of the two questions.
Yes.
This particular demographic that's very interested. In fact, they are overwhelmingly our strongest supporters, that category.
See, and what's so interesting about that observation, and I don't know if everyone could hear that he was just speaking to the point that a lot of the people who are members of this council are corporate. They're interested in world affairs because of international competitiveness and related issues. But being able to have a good grasp of who it is that makes up your group, and then link your programming to appeal to that group is really that's the right combination. Yes.
I just don't like the idea of saying you have to link the programming to their interests. We want to link up programming to the issues we think are important.
Well,
that's a very thin line.
yeah. Well, what I think that is certainly a legitimate perspective, and I would respect that. What I'm talking to you about is marketing and communications. So for us, in communications professions, we start with the audience and then build from there. Another way of doing it is to start with what you would like to communicate and then try to find the audience. That's a little harder.
Well,
Yes.
I want to speak for myself in Alabama. You know, if I had to appeal to one audience, I would offend another.
Yes.
And so what I strive for is intellectual and legitimacy.
Yes.
And using my own judgment. And I've had to offend board members inevitably.
Yes.
Because they have known people or invited people that they've seen on Fox News or and I said, oh, you do that, I can't
Yeah.
do it.
Yes. Well, and so what I'd like to do is to move on, because remember that the overall audience we're talking about is that 33% of Americans. Within that are some very diverse groups that I'm speaking to now. So what that insight about those different groups gives you is different ways of appealing to more Americans to expand their interests. So the next group I want to talk to is called Solid Liberals. They're one of the most secular groups and among the best educated. About 1/2 are college grads and 27% have post-grad experience. Concentrations of this group can be found in the Northeast and the West. In terms of media habits, 1/3 of the Solid Liberals listen to NPR, 27% are regular viewers of CNN, 21% regularly watch The Daily Show, and 18% regularly read the New York Times. A majority, 60%, are social media users. 59% of them have a passport, and 21% are first or second generation Americans. Raise your hand if you feel like you have a lot of people who might be solid liberals in your councils. Yes. So it sounds like that is a big group. Does anybody want to speak to it or explain? Here, there? Yes, in the back? You? Yes?
Well, yeah, I mean, this, for us in central Pennsylvania, at least the people that are attracted to our programming, have a solid educational background, they are widely traveled, they care about discussing these issues, and that seems to be who we're drawing.
Yeah. Yes.
In Washington, D.C., it wouldn't surprise most people here that our members are pretty liberal. They fit the description you just gave. But I would add that most of our board members are pretty conservative. And so we have a dichotomy right here. Our programming generally pleases our liberal constituency. Maybe our board members aren't quite as interested in it.
Yeah. One other thought? Yes.
Just a point about that. We have a certain percentage in Atlanta. We have this huge corporate support, but there are university people from various universities on our board and come to our meetings, and it's that group. But the most prominent collaboration, which is actually written about a lot, is between UPS and Coca-Cola on the one hand, and CARE on the other. And Gales on our board, the number two person at UPS and the Coca-Cola company. They are actively engaged in bridging those gaps and representing very different constituencies.
That's terrific. That's a great example. Yes.
We are a new council in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, under the leadership of Joyce Davis. She's the president and the founder. And I would say maybe we as a community, because we do have almost half the people members who is a minority. And it's pretty, nice group. And we're working together. There's probably a lot of
Terrific, thank you. The final group I want to talk about is the group that Pew refers to as the postmoderns. Now, this is an audience that I suspect represents a growth opportunity for many of you. The postmoderns are people who favor the use of diplomacy rather than force. They're the youngest of the typology groups, with 67% of them under age 50 and 32% of them under age 30. As with the other groups we've discussed, a majority of the postmoderns are non-Hispanic white. Half live in either the Northeast or the West, and a majority live in the suburbs. The postmoderns are one of the least religious groups, with nearly a third unaffiliated with any religious tradition. A large number have a passport. Like the solid liberals, many of them use social networking. 1 in 5 regularly listen to NPR, and 14% regularly watch The Daily Show. Have any of you had particular success attracting people who fit the profile of the postmoderns, the younger group particularly? Yes.
We have a strong young leaders group that talk about it more and more, and that I think is represented very well.
Yeah.
Very diverse group, many of them not
Yes.
I have 2 board members over 50, and everybody else is 40 and under. All minorities is Puerto Rico, so that doesn't fit the exact profile. That's kind of the demographics of that group.
And was that the origins of the group? To start it with a focus on that younger?
It wasn't, but those who got more interested in it. It doesn't help you social media with the university and so forth. Those who started council were also Rotarians. So my 2 elder states that the board are former past governor Rotarian, and then because the rest of the board members are basically 30s and 40s for solids, and a lot of the young crowd of the university.
Fantastic. Yes. Where are you from? Did you say Puerto Rico? Yes. Yes, Becky.
I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. We have a young professionals group, so we're trying to grow our own into the category that you are describing, because we tend to be the other group. Older, actually more conservative, rather liberal, perhaps, but a nice range. But we have a very active young professionals group who clearly are the demographic that you're describing there, and we're hoping that we do have one of them as a member of the board, and we're hoping that that will grow us, the demographic, because clearly we need it. We have quite a large retirement community, so we do
Good, yes.
Yes, we also have a good group of young people with Harrisburg Young Professionals who cooperate with us. We have one on the board, but we find that this age group is very good for volunteering, for serving as semi-staff people, that kind of thing, and they bring a great deal of energy and ideas for programs.
Where is this?
Harrisburg.
Great. So the political typology study provides us with some great insight, and how do we use that for communications planning? There are three things I think this kind of research helps us with. First, it helps us narrow our target audience. So the overall set of data gives us an alternative to targeting all Americans. It gives us a way to target those who believe it's important for our country to be active in the world. We know from the research that that is roughly 33% of the population. The second thing it allows us to do is to segment the audience according to distinguishing characteristics. So we now know about different groups within that 33% and have the ability to communicate with them in ways that appeal to their beliefs and their interests. That kind of information is most useful for us when we're developing and framing messages to attract them to the World Affairs Councils. And then the third thing that we learned from that kind of research is how our audiences get and process information. So the research tells us something about their media habits and their use of social media, for example, and that is useful to you when you begin to think about tactical elements of your plan. So to sum up where we are so far, our objective to deepen the conviction that Americans should be active in world affairs. Our target, 33% of Americans who already believe that this is important. Now we need a strategy to unify our communications efforts. In my view, the best strategy to pursue in this case is one that is already embedded in your mission to engage Americans in critical global issues. Public Agenda is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that's expert at engaging citizens in public affairs at the community, state, and national levels. Its purpose is to create the conditions for greater community engagement with public life and a more citizen-centered approach to politics. Through its work to help citizens with diverse views find common ground and productively engage in the policy process, its Center for Public Engagement has developed a set of principles that may be applied by any organization. Public Agenda has helped organizations apply these principles to make progress on complex issues in fields such as energy and environment, education, and fiscal policy. I would encourage all of you to visit the website at publicagenda.org to download Public Engagement, a primer, which is a free booklet which describes these 10 principles in detail. The booklet may be especially helpful to you as you're considering what kind of programming you might be putting together related to your 6 top issues for the 2012 election. Today I'm going to highlight just 4 of those principles that I think will be particularly relevant to your efforts to engage people in global affairs. What makes these 4 principles important to our discussion is that they're in some way related to communications. So the engagement principles I'm going to discuss are: begin by listening, attend to people's leading concerns, provide the right type and amount of information at the right time, and create multiple varied opportunities for deliberation and dialogue. The first principle is to begin by listening. Looking at the kind of public opinion research such as I've just been referencing is one form of listening. And there are other inexpensive ways to listen to conversations about global issues online, including following issues trending on Twitter, the comments made on online news coverage, and blogs about these issues. What you're listening for is the nature of the conversation and the nature of the conversants. The next engagement principle I wanted to share is to attend to people's leading concerns. It can be tempting to write off misinformed opinion or beliefs that you know run counter to the facts of a situation. To get people truly engaged, however, you need to meet them where they are. Give people an opportunity to express their views, and then figure out how to respect and acknowledge those views while moving the conversation forward. The third principle for engagement is to provide the right type and amount of information at the right time. You have an amazing program over the next 2 days that is packed with speakers who have deep expertise and impressive experience in world affairs. They're going to be providing an invaluable perspective to those of you who are fortunate enough to be in the room to hear their remarks. Yet it's important to keep in mind when you're developing programming in your own community that relying exclusively on experts to present information on issues can in some cases stifle discussion and engagement. Delivering too much information or presenting information at too high a level can turn off the very people you want to engage. As council leaders, you can help to prevent this by assuring that the information presented by experts under your auspices is translated into terms that the less informed individuals in your audience can grasp. And you can go even further by structuring educational sessions less as lectures or presentations and more as dialogues allowing for an open exchange of views. The final principle for public engagement that I'll speak to is to create multiple varied opportunities for deliberation and dialogue. What I've seen about the programming of the World Affairs Councils is that you are already offering a variety of ways for people to become informed about critical global issues. You may be able to further enhance your programming by supplementing that educational programming with programs that are more designed to engage people in conversations. One of the best vehicles for doing this outside of live meetings and events is online communications and social media. You have a speaker later today who's going to be focusing on the topic of social media, so I'm only going to say a few things about it here. But if our strategy is to engage Americans in critical global issues, social media has to be seriously considered. We heard an example where you're relying heavily on online and social media in Puerto Rico. How many of you are currently using social media as part of your council communications? So you have not been as trepidatious, perhaps, as some others to venture into this area. Does anyone who is newly using social media want to comment on how it's working for you? What you think of the experience?
It's an ideal way to bring in younger people. You have to use it. And our Facebook page is really good for stimulating dialogue.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
Yes.
And over here.
Same here. Basically, whatever is doing, whatever's already on Facebook, basically tag with friends to become members, and those friends, with their kids, and it does all kind of spread out. We have already 450 folks who follow the page. And from there, I was looking to gather friends, parents become members. So.
Yes.
There was actually, I'm from the council in Jacksonville, Florida. There was actually research done by our local university on the use of social media in nonprofits, and we participated at the council, and I can see from the results of the study that we very much align with other organizations in Northeast Florida, in that we use Facebook and other social media to promote our events, but not so much really engage with the people that are part of our council, our members, or even our board members.
Okay. Yes, another example.
We do Facebook, which is reasonably successful, although very up and down. We do Twitter, and that's a whole lot less successful. We have 52 followers. So it's a mixed bag.
Yes, I'll take one more example, yes.
In Washington, we do use Facebook and reach out to a lot of younger people this way. But there's a problem. They don't tend to join our organization. They don't become members. And we're trying to figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah. Is that your experience as well? You, yes.
I would just say actually, it not only perhaps the same, but there's a whole group of people, myself included, that frankly want to stay under the radar on Facebook. We're regional, but not really interested in creating a country that
I think that there is those of you who have not yet been using social media could legitimately be wondering whether it's worth it to dedicate scarce resources that you need to closely monitor, to stimulate, and to engage in conversations about global issues online. If you think about it in the context of your mission and what I'm talking about this morning, social media does require your constant care and feeding. At least two of the audience segments that we've talked about targeting, the postmoderns and the solid liberals, are heavy social media users. So we would expect that of the younger groups, and some of the examples that were shared are related to reaching younger people, but it's also applicable to that very interested group of solid liberals of all ages. So that fact alone could justify a more aggressive social media strategy, but when you combine audience interest in social media with the fact that social media is an essential tool for engagement, it becomes pretty hard to ignore. Last week I was at a conference of public relations agency leaders where the theme was social revolution, are you mobilizing communities or just a voice in the crowd? And you might expect that the people in the room, all of whom are professional communicators, would have fully embraced social media long ago. The truth is that although it's rare to find a public relations or a public affairs firm without a strong digital capability these days, it's still a little scary to a lot of industry leaders. As one of the speakers candidly confessed, the more senior you get, the tougher it is to keep up. You have the constant sense that you're being left behind. A media executive on the program talked about the downside of having instant and constant access to news and information and trying to figure out what deserved his attention. It's difficult to distinguish between a mosquito attack and a nuclear attack in terms of what you respond to, he said. So believe me, I empathize with those of you who may be reluctant to embrace social media. I'm probably the only person in this room who has an AOL email account. Oh no, there's another one. There's another one. 2, 3, 4. The number of tweets I've made in the past couple of years is equal to the number of Twitter accounts I have, which is 2. Still, I think the opportunity to use social media to advance the mission of the World Affairs Councils is just too great to ignore. At this same public relations conference, former White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs summarized the advantages of using social media in a policy environment. First, it allows you to be where the audience is. Second, it allows you to see what's happening. And third, it creates a two-sided dynamic conversation. He was also quick to point out that it requires a two-sided dynamic conversation. So I think we're well past the time when the common approach to using social media was to graft it onto your existing communications program and cross your fingers. At this point, using social media as an effective engagement tool requires fully integrating it into your communications plans and being prepared to invest the time, the energy, and the resources to get it right. So I am winding down, and I hope that at some point in this conversation I've stimulated your thinking about how you might use communications to advance your vital mission. We discussed 3 steps for beginning to develop effective communications: setting clear objectives, targeting audiences selectively, and developing unifying strategies. It's my hope that what you'll be able to do is to use what you've heard today to jumpstart a communications planning process of your own that you can figure out how to execute in a way that makes sense for your markets. And I truly hope you do so, because the more I'm exposed to you and your work and see what you're doing to implement this critical mission, the more I realize just how important it is to educate, inspire, and engage Americans in critical global issues. Thank you.
I want to say that maybe part of our mission is not going to be accomplished through membership and attendance. Maybe we have to stretch our minds and think, our mission is we'll have different ways of doing it besides members and attendance, I think.
I'm just going to get a time check from our fearless leader. I'll be doing this, having a discussion group later this afternoon, but I don't know if you want me to take questions or...
Actually, Merle, go ahead and you can take a couple of questions now because I think your presentation was extremely stimulating. And so you can take maybe 3 questions now, and then Merle will be available for a breakout. So.
Okay, great. So why don't we, let's start in the back and then move forward.
My question is an issue. Obviously, social media is very dynamic, and that's the way of the future. And that's where you must have dialogue. But in terms of our commitment to being non-political, having one of us respond or enter into that dialogue poses certain problems. I wonder if you comment about that. I mean, the White House has no problem entering into dialogue. They have positions on everything.
Yeah. It is the idea of two-way conversation does take some getting used to. It takes being able to give up control, which is a very hard thing to do. As I look at your mission as a nonpartisan organization, but to educate and inspire and engage Americans, it is possible to contribute to a conversation, to contribute to a dialogue without imposing a point of view or making a judgment about the right or wrong of that dialogue. And I think you would find that public agenda primer would have some ideas about doing that, how to stimulate a conversation without having it become an advocacy effort. Yes, I actually had an order I was going to go. You here and then down in the front. Yes.
Thank you. In terms of social media, I have a question about the national strategy. We all do local events and engage with our local communities, and so it makes sense to have a social media strategy that engages local people as well. But just the mere platform itself is global. So it seems to me it might be a great, if we're all doing little Facebooks and tweets and conversations, or blogging, it's an opportunity for our members in Columbus, Ohio to talk with someone in Montgomery, and I wonder how you see from the chapter, then we have the national office, how the platform might integrate us.
Yes. What your observation is absolutely right. The great thing about social media is that it has no geographic boundaries. So that means that you can use it for things like a dialogue that extend beyond your market. You can have conversations that connect and fuel the network, as well as reach out to other people that you hope to get involved. The way to go about it, I think, is to, not knowing much about the governance of your organization, so my suggestion would be that you come up with a social media strategy at the central level, and that be developed with input from those of you who are using social media effectively in your markets. Because ideally, you could have forums that were driven at the national level that you could participate in and benefit from. Because those people who may be attracted from a national standpoint can then be channeled to a chapter to become engaged locally. Yes, and then I promised you yes.
Thank you. I wanted to follow on a comment earlier that the more you communicate generally, the more you dilute the meaning of membership. And I'd like to ask other people, stay on the forum now, to look at this dichotomy between spreading your message wider and having an exclusive view of membership. And balance that. And the related question to you too is, the social media, are we using it, or should we be using it just to spread the invitation to participate, or to, in fact, exchange ideas, post summaries of programs, video games, etc. In other words, content. Between reaching out to attract versus content.
Yeah, I think that that's a question, the second part of your question, which was how specifically to use social media, I think is something that your task force could decide. What's important for you and what makes sense for the organization. I will speak just briefly to this idea of communicating more broadly versus trying to control access to the information by having people become members. And that's not I didn't put that through the right frame, but that's kind of how I see it. If you think in order to fulfill your mission, you want to reach those people who have an interest in seeing America be active in world affairs. That is your prospective membership base, that's your prospective contributors, that is the universe that will be critical to the success of everything that you do to advance your mission. So what the membership becomes is the engagement opportunity. That's why if you have as your objective to deepen that commitment, you want to talk to people so that they are engaged in a dialogue, they see this is something that is of interest to me, they get something of value from that dialogue, and they say, gosh, I would like to see this happening more, I would like to connect with other people who feel this way, I would like to have access to incredible programming, and I know, because I've seen it out there in the world, that the place that's happening in my community is at the World Affairs Council. So it drives your membership. And as those conversations are happening, you want to say that, if you're interested, you want to be part of that conversation, and you want to say, you can connect with other people who are part of it by joining the World Affairs Council. Okay? Thank you.